In December 2007, 9,000 delegates from 187 countries arrived in Bali, Indonesia, for the United Nations Climate Change Conference. Diplomats and scientists were convening to try to strike a new global climate treaty. As Dr. Rajendra Pachauri arrived, the IPCC had just issued a string of ever more urgent reports. He was hoping that governments, especially the U.S., were finally listening.
With me is Dr. Rajendra Pachauri, the chairman of
Ironically,
the
the Bush administration had welcomed Pachauri to the IPCC, expecting that this engineer and economist on the board of several large Indian energy companies would be cautious and sympathetic to the U.S. position on climate change.
If we lose momentum over here, then we have a very short period of time.
Instead, Pachauri has repeatedly sounded the alarm and put responsibility squarely on businesses and governments in the industrialized West.
This seems to be the most critical issue. And
if one looks at the historical responsibility for the problem, the fact that the concentration of greenhouse gases is essentially the result of emissions that have taken place for 150 plus years, largely in the developed countries. That's one reason. And the second reason is that in terms of economic and technological capacity, the developed countries are certainly better equipped to do something about this than the developing world.
U.S. negotiators in Bali didn't see it that way.
Next is the United States.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Unfortunately, there have been many strong statements.
They maintained that America would make no cuts unless developing nations also agreed. They didn't expect what happened next.
So I just want to state this preference of the developing countries.
For the first time, the developing countries stepped forward and said, we will negotiate verifiable, measurable, and reportable emissions reduction measures to be incorporated in the treaty. The developing countries called their bluff.
May I now call upon China.
And China was in the lead in saying we should do that. The U.S. negotiator said no.
I have to say that, the formulation that has been put forward, we cannot accept.
Thank you. Thank you, United States.
And they were booed on the floor. And suddenly, Paula Dobriansky recognized that the story that was going to come out of Bali was that the United States destroyed a major climate agreement.
Oh, that's the United States who wishes to speak again.
So she sat there, flipped the microphone back on, shut the meeting down by saying we won't stand in the way of the consensus.
Let me say to you that we will go forward and join consensus in this today.
Who knows whether there was actual direct communication with the White House on that or not. The cell phones were going like crazy at the U.S. delegation table. But it was clearly, I think, in her negotiating instructions that, above all, don't let the United States get blamed for blowing up a deal.